want to forget that. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I have a short introduction here. Welcome, everybody. My name is Brian Will. I'm a member of the Friends of the Lower Olentangy Watersheds Education and Outreach Committee. And today we're going to be talking about stormwater awareness. First of all, let me tell you a little bit about FLOW if you're new to the Friends of the Lower Olentangy Watershed Organization. FLOW, as we call ourselves, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to keeping the Olentangy River and its tributaries clean and safe for all to enjoy through public education, volunteerism, activities, and coordinating with local decision makers. You can learn more about FLOW and our projects and volunteer for some of our projects like tree plantings and litter pickups at our website at olentangywatershed.org. That's olentangywatershed.org, and I'll put that in the chat. Tonight, as we kick off Stormwater Awareness Week in Ohio, we're going to be hearing from Dave Reutter. We're going to learn more about the increasingly heavy rain events and the impact to our local waterways as well as tributaries of these events, and the effect on residential property and certainly on the watershed and habitat and for all those creatures that live in the water, around the water. What can we do to protect the watershed, its animal and habitats, and the quality of the water that's running off of our yards, and that's water coming off of our parking lots and driveways? What can we do to minimize the impact during these heavy rain events? Dave Reutter is joining us from Franklin Soil and Water, where he provides assistance to federal, state, and local agencies to encourage soil and water conservation and protection through the review of regulations and development procedures, including ongoing requests for subdivision plots, stormwater management, sediment and erosion plans, and so forth. And I'm sure he'll tell us a little bit more about his role at the Franklin Soil and Water. And with that, I will turn it over to Dave, and I'm going to be monitoring the chat, folks. So if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat as we go on, and I'll find the appropriate point to jump in and ask Dave those questions. And we'll also have time at the end of our webinar tonight for questions as well. So Dave Reutter, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks. Everybody see my screen? That's sharing okay?
Yep, looks good.
Good. So we're going to talk a little bit about our stormwater infrastructure. I hope to explain to you a little bit how it works and how we got there, and where it's going probably as well. This is like was mentioned, this is Stormwater Awareness Week, so this is a real good opportunity to learn more about how our infrastructure works, what we can do to impact it in a positive way, and some of the things to think about. I'm always struck by something when I talk to people about the sewer system. Sometimes the majority of people don't really understand how our sewer system works. So hopefully we're going to talk a little bit about that. There we go. Get that advancing. But first, like I say, we're going to do a little background first, a little history lesson, and look to how we got here today to where we're at with our stormwater system. So if you think about, where humans have always settled, it's always been around water, whether it's coastal areas, rivers, ponds, lakes. Water really is that reason, that stuff of life that we have for settlement. So when you think about, what we call the cradles of civilization, you've got the Tigris and Euphrates, the Yellow River in China. There's all of these great rivers that have developed great cities around them, because that's where we're attracted to it. And it's that source water. It gives us, that consistent food source. You've always got the fishing and the hunting and the things that attracts. So that's always been an important part of civilization. Travel and trade routes, later on as we develop more technologies like boats and things of that nature, and getting those trade routes established. You know, most of the Indian communities here in the States, you know, have always been along great rivers. The Scioto River was a trail for way before settlement, you know, European settlement occurred. So we see that we're drawn to these areas, these waters. And it's also important for sanitation. You know, it's always been a means of taking it to that land of away, as we like to say. Where's that going? It's going away. That's great. So, but that has been a big part of how our development occurs. You probably heard this quote before, you know, the solution to pollution is dilution. And in a simple sense, that's true. If you have something that, you know, you need to get rid of or make less notable, you dilute it. But, you know, I'm kind of like, well, let's not pollute in the first place. We can not put it there in the first place. I threw this picture up here because this is the outfall of the Tiber River from old Rome, and it was in use from 600 BC to 1862. And these areas were almost considered, you know, sacrosanct in a way. They revered these places because of the abilities for those waters to cleanse the area and take things away. But that's how we've always been doing civilization for a long time. All our sanitary sewer, all our storm sewer, this was all being taken out through these sewer systems that were created. And most of the sewer systems created were frankly old stream beds, you know, channels and things of that nature. We have followed that same pattern with the development of all our sewer systems. Bring it up a little bit further into the modern day, you know, we've got these situations here, the Cuyahoga River that caught fire. I like this title because, you know, it caught fire at least a dozen times and no one cared until 1969. In fact, what's funny about it is you can't even find a picture of the 1969 fire, or at least not a published picture. These pictures are from the 52 fire that they had to find back in the archives to run this story actually about the fire in 69. But this was caused by industrial pollution that was being discharged down the river. It caught fire and burned several train trestles and some wharf areas, and got into some dock areas. But the 69 fire was put out in about 20 minutes. Little fanfare, just because it had become kind of commonplace for them. Well, that fire also launched another fire, and that was the creation of the EPA in 1970. That was one of the first things that came out of it. With that came the Clean Water Act. This is really the legislation that helped EPA enforce pollution controls on a lot of different areas. And what an auspicious occasion. Tomorrow is actually the day that it was enacted, so 50 years tomorrow. So that brought about a lot of regulation, a lot of control over things. Most of that was industrial. You got the industrial permits, so that started cleaning up a lot of the waterfront areas where you had industrial discharges. A lot of the air regulations came into place at the same time, but we'll stick with that water side of it and what that meant. If you ever want to look that up, that's 40 CFR in the Code of Federal Registration. That's where you can check it out and see what those codified rules are. But a lot of what we do today is influenced by this. In fact, I've been working 30 years in the business, and it's because of this Clean Water Act. So with the EPA, you've got what's called the MPDs permitting. That's the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. This is the system that has been put in place to look at these discharges, how they discharge, what they're discharging, what those limits are. So you still have discharging areas, but we are diluting it basically. So we haven't really moved the bar that much. We're just putting limits on the amount that can be discharged. And we're seeing that more change of that coming with the new total maximum daily load standards that are being put into the permit language. This again is that idea that streams and lakes and the water bodies can only assimilate so much until they start being impacted. So what can we do to limit that? And some of that is regulation. We're having to say, okay, you can only discharge this much before we start losing that water quality standard that we're trying to achieve. So with MPDS came phase ones in the 90s. The phase one communities were the communities over 100,000 with public owned treatment works, big sewer systems. Those came into the MPDS permits in the 90s. You only have about four, I think there's four phase one communities in Ohio. That would be the big cities like Cleveland and Columbus. They're the phase ones that have been doing this since 90s pretty much and trying to limit what's going into the rivers basically. Phase two came along in the 2000s. This was the community smaller than 100,000. So all the suburbs, all those types of communities were the phase two communities affected by this MPDS permitting. So all of these communities now have stormwater permits in place, and there's specific minimum control measures that come under those permits that we try to meet. And that's what my job is managing a lot of these municipal permits and those MCMs that they have to meet. So if you think about 6 minimum control measures, they're public education and outreach, which this is one of those events, and I'll be reporting out on this for the year for that MS4 permit, because we're doing Stormwater Awareness Week and trying to outreach to individuals about stormwater and the things that they can do to learn about it and know more about it and understand it better, hopefully for changes in behavior. That's really what we're looking for. Is there's things that we need to change if we're going to reach some of these goals. Minimum control measures, like I said, there were 6 of them. You've got public education outreach. You've got what's called IDDE, which is illicit discharge detection and elimination. Public participation. You've got construction and post-construction monitoring for any new development. And then there's the MCM6, which is good housekeeping, which is for municipalities in how they run their own in-house systems. They want to be the model of good stormwater protection and prevention, and how do they do that? And that's what 6 is all about. So let's get into what types of sewer systems there are. You've got 3 different types. There's sanitary. When you think of sanitary, it's everything in the house that's piped out of the house and going to the sanitary, hopefully. That's something that we oftentimes run into, is it's not going to the sanitary. You've got home septic treatment systems. Most of those are hooked up to septic field or a mound system, or they have discharging systems actually that discharge to possibly the MS4. So those sanitary systems are different than what we call the storm system. Storm system is just what it sounds like. When there's a storm and rainfall and runoff, that's what is flowing into those storm systems and taking whatever it flushes with it directly to the streams, most likely. Only recently have we begun to do stormwater facilities that treat that. That's when you see the big stormwater ponds around development. Not all ponds are stormwater related. Some of them are simply decorative. Some of them are dug for soil. They need the fill for the site. So they'll dig a hole and create a water feature and use that fill for the land. So not all ponds are storm related, but many of them are when you see new development go in these days. That's only been around for about, well, the 90s. It was a suggestion to have stormwater controls. By the 2000s, it really was part of the construction permits to be doing stormwater control in some form. Then we have combined systems, and it's just what it sounds like. They're sanitary and storm combined. And this was something that with the MPDS permit in the phase 1 and 2 communities, the combined sewers were a big problem. This is where you see a lot of the US cities, pretty much all of the older US cities have combined systems in some form. And all of these were given consent orders to meet the federal permit requirements. So you've seen a lot of big sewer projects around the country to try to stem this combined sewer system issue. Philadelphia has had big issues there because all of their old sewer systems were that, going back to that Roman type of system where you had a combined sewer pipe that took everything in the kitchen sink, down to the river. So that is what you see in a lot of the older US cities and a lot of the consent orders out there for fixing that. This is some of our local infrastructure. If you've been down Jackson Pike, just south of 104, you'll see these big tanks down there. These are the Jackson Pike digesters down there. And if you think about the location of these, all of these kinds of systems, and this is true around the country, is they're downstream. This is all gravity-fed sewer systems that end up, for us, it's south of town. That's where the sewer plants are, because it's a gravity-fed system. Jackson Pike handles mostly the west and northwest side of the city. Then we have the. If you're interested in Jackson Pike, they've got a great YouTube video on how it works. You can use that QR code with your phone and get there, or there's the website that you can take a look at the YouTube channel. It really will open your eyes on the level of sanitation that's required for big city sanitation facilities. This is the Southerly Wastewater Treatment Plant. It's a little further south down the Scioto. I really am intrigued by this picture. If you notice around it, there's water everywhere. This was flooding that occurred on the Scioto, which happens fairly regularly. And fortunately, our wastewater treatment plant does not get flooded in this case. Access might be a little difficult during this time, but lots of flooding in other areas occurs at sanitation plants, and you see these plants go down because of flooding situations like this. That's been a big problem around the country, especially like New Orleans has terrible problems with this. A lot of communities, because those plants are built, in that low spot because of the fall, you need that gravity feed to get to the plant. So some of the things that are happening, this was a big part of that consent order. Columbus has spent a lot of money on the fix. One of these is what's called the ORS channel. I forget what the acronym's for, but it's the Olentangy Interceptor. This was a sewer outfall of the combined sewer that was discharging during very wet weather. And what happens is you get stormwater mixing with the sanitary water, and it's too much for the treatment plant to handle, and it discharges to the streams. So that's the problem with the combined system. So the idea is to separate those systems and do something about that discharge to our creeks and rivers. Again, good presentation here on the ORS project. And if you look at that diagram there, the ORS is that deep tunnel on the bottom of the screen there that is 200 feet deep. You know, it's a 20-foot diameter tunnel. It's 4.5 miles long. And what that does is store that overage, that overflow of water, instead of going into the streams, it stores that in that tunnel until it's able to be treated at the treatment plant.
Dave, so a quick question. Is that what's going on over by Olentangy River Road near OSU and Target, and where they're shut down lanes? Is that what they're digging? Is the deep water tunnel?
I am not sure. There's several shafts that access the tunnel, and I'm not sure where those locations are at. It may be. I'm just not sure. Sorry, I can't answer that one.
No worries.
But there's several of these projects going on, and they're kind of, you know, being 200 feet underground with a boring machine, you really don't even hardly notice them occurring, except at the construction site where these shafts are at. A little bit better view of it. So if you look at this graphic here, you can see to the left, you've got that separated sewer area. You've got a storm system that would outfall to the river, but then you also got that sanitary system that's going to the local interceptor. And again, remember, this is all gravity fed, so all of our creeks and streams around here likely have a sewer trunk running down next to them. For the vast majority of them, there is this main sewer trunk that, you know, it was, from a constructability standpoint, it was an easy way to get that. You know, you already had the stream with the fall in it, that gravity feed, just follow along with it and install that sewer pipe. So a lot of our streams have this sewer main that runs down to the treatment plant. Then when you get into the local, you know, the city area, the combined sewer system, they really didn't plan to have separate systems. So a lot of that, these older urban areas have this combined sewer situation where as you get stormwater entering the system and it overflows, the pipes either are too small or their capacity is already maxed out on them. They start overflowing and you get problems with basements. We have a lot of areas in town that have backflow preventers put on their sewer lines. So when we get into this situation, you don't get the sewage flowing back up the pipes and into your basements. So that's the kind of situation we see in the older urban areas. And this, because of this, this is what these ORs, these deep channels, deep sewer channels are like, and what's created to help alleviate that. Here's some pictures from the ORS construction. You can see that's the boring machine just coming into one of the tunnel openings. There's these vertical tunnel shafts that are enormous vertical tunnel shafts where the stormwater flows down into and fills up, and they can monitor that level as this pipe fills. Millions and millions of gallons. It's really quite an incredible project. I encourage you to dig more into it with that website, and I'll have this in the presentation, and you guys can take a look at that later if you want to. So here's what we call the MS4, Municipal Separate Sanitary Storm System. This is kind of the idealized look at it. You have your household wastewater that's going to the sanitary sewer, which goes to the treatment plant. On the other side of that, you have the storm drain, where you do get that storm discharge. The runoff occurs, that storm water goes directly to your waterways. So that, again, like I say, is the idealized picture. What we find is there's often cross connections there, or there's differences in how those are working. I frequently we talk about don't put that down the storm sewer. How things you can discharge and things you can't. Even things like pool discharge. People shutting down the pools this time of year for the year, and they've got chlorinated water. What do they do with that? How do they get rid of that? Well, that's where we look at that change in behavior and try to say, well, first try to dechlorinate it, let it sit a while before you discharge it. But then in that sense, it could go down the storm drain. Some municipalities don't even allow that discharge to go to the storm drain. And the reason for that is because that system now is the public sewer system. That storm drain is what we call part of the MS4. And any discharge that's not stormwater going into that drain is actually an illicit discharge. So we do a lot of work at looking at that. We do what's called dry weather screening throughout the year for communities, and actually go to the MS4 outfalls and see what's coming out of them. If it's been dry for 2 days, there shouldn't be water coming out of some of these storm drains. So we backtrack and look up through the system to figure out what's making that discharge and whether it's an allowable discharge or not. With sanitary systems, sometimes we get cross connections. Whether it's intentional, or which would be illegal, or not intentional, a lot of times the sanitary discharges will get hooked up to the wrong pipe, basically, and you've got a sanitary discharge in a storm drain. So those are the kind of things that we as a district do around the communities here in Columbus. So if you've heard about Blueprint Columbus, this is part of also the wet weather plan for Columbus in their phase 1 efforts to stem some of these issues. You can see it's kind of the older urban communities of Columbus. Blueprint has gone in and looked at how they can help with the discharges in there, the wet weather plan. And something that's a little bit different about Blueprint is what's called SSO. We have combined sewer overflows and we have sanitary sewer overflows. And the sanitary sewer overflows caused mostly by infiltration into the existing system. A lot of times those pipes are not watertight, or there's connections like you see here. A lot of roof drains are hooked to the sanitary lateral that goes out to the sewer system, the sanitary sewer system. Floor drains, the sump pumps, most of that was pumped into the sanitary lateral. So when you get really wet weather, it really comes down hard, you got all of those rooftops, all of those groundwater pumps going, in addition to the sanitary needs of that system, and it basically just is too much for the undersized sanitary. So Blueprints looked at that and gone to changing that up by lining that lateral. Probably got some folks that have had that done at their house, where the lateral sewer line gets lined so that it's not intercepting any water. And those roof drains are getting moved back and out to the street. A lot of rain gardens have been tried in Clintonville, that area. in a way of using that rainwater, using that stormwater in a way that's going to detain it or uptake it and slow it down to the streams. So it really is helping both the sanitary and the stormwater at the same time by doing something like this. I really went through that quick, and I'm hoping you've got questions of me. Like I said, my main background is looking at the storm side of things. The things that we do now for stormwater really is green infrastructure is what we're pushing more and more these days. That's a way of getting infiltration, using the ground for infiltration purposes. Uptake, trees are a great thing to have for stormwater. When we do stormwater calculations for development sites, the one thing that we're comparing it to is forested areas, the pre-developed condition of that. What is that pre-developed condition? If you've got forested areas, that's the highest, best use of land when it comes to stormwater. So that's the thing we should be going for. And part of that is that green infrastructure design and trying to get those environmental services back into development to help with the stormwater. It's only going to get worse. We're with the climate change we're seeing, the intensity of the storm events is getting greater and greater. It really hits hard and fast, and we have to have some resiliency to it. Otherwise, you're going to see some very negative impacts that we're already seeing quite a bit of now anyway. Urban stream syndrome, the erosion of banks because of that new level of intense rainfall trying to drain down streams. This is the kind of thing that we're seeing a lot of bank erosion from. And frankly, that bank erosion, that's once again transporting phosphorus. We're having problems. Lake Erie is the focus now, but I'm telling you, it's not just Lake Erie. It's everywhere. We see a lot of that bank erosion, that phosphorus loading, and we're going to have to come up with solutions on how to deal with that. And even from an urban standpoint, that's something that we're looking at now is what can we do in an urban setting that's going to really impact phosphorus loading, because that's going to come up with the TMDL. So that's something that is on the forefront more and more. Is how do we assign loads to various entities within an MS4, and then how do we achieve load reduction through practices? What are those practices? So that's something that we're looking at currently, trying to understand a little bit better what we can do to impact that.
So Dave, I
am open for questions.
Have had some questions come in. Sarah's asking, could you explain why Blueprint is going through with the trial system, rain gardens, and will this limit infiltration? Well,
so something to think about with the Blueprint area is that SSO problem. So because of that
what is
infiltration,
SSO? I'm sorry.
Sanitary sewer overflow.
Gotcha. Okay.
So because their sanitary system in that area is not very tight, you don't want to have soil infiltration in a broad sense there, because you're then just putting that water back into the system, which is going to make it into the sanitary system. So in that sense, you can do some infiltration. Most of their infiltration is within the cell, that is the rain garden itself. So they're relying more on the rain garden and not the surrounding soils for the infiltration. So it's a little bit different situation there for rain garden installation. All soils have a field capacity for moisture that it's not gonna migrate anywhere. So I still encourage infiltration into the soils. You just don't want saturated soils where you're actually getting movement of the water you just need to be reaching that field capacity of the soils.
Okay. I had a question too. What can we do individually at our residences to limit the impact on the watershed when it comes to stormwater? For example, I've always heard you should sweep up your grass clippings after mowing, because those grass clippings will be swept into the storm sewer and could impact the quality of the water. Yep. Because of fertilizers and chemicals, that sort of thing. And I've been a huge advocate of banning coal tar sealants on driveways, because in heavy rain events, those driveways are swept with water, and it takes the chemicals out of the coal tar sealants, the PAHs, and they end up in the Yep. stormwater and into the river, and then they harm fish. And you see oil on parking lots and litter along parking lots. So what are some things that you recommend to those of us who own property or just in our neighborhoods to help the watershed?
Well, first off, I think it's important to understand what your stormwater infrastructure is. A lot of people don't really check their gutter system. How is it hooked up? Does it discharge properly? If it's clean stormwater running off of your rooftop and out to the curb to go into the storm drain, that's what it's intended for. Make sure it's working like that. A lot of them aren't, and they're either overflowing and it's running off the side of the house and causing some erosion and causing that soil to move and go down the street. Make sure that that's all working properly. This is a great time right now with leaves. Everybody's breaking up the leaves. They're putting it in bags and having the guys haul it away. That's valuable fertilizer. It's valuable carbon. What you should really be doing is incorporating that into your soils. The more carbon you have in your soils, the better the water retention is. It changes the water chemistry completely in your soils. So mulch those leaves, keep them out of the gutter, sweep your gutters. People, we've tried to get that change of behavior. Everybody used to take their leaves where they have leaf pickup. It's like rake them to the gutter. It's like, no, we don't want them in the gutter. The best thing to do is get your mower out, mulch them in place. Then you don't have these big piles of leaves to do. If you got to mulch them in one area and make a nice mulch pile that's at least much smaller to haul off if they have to. But you should really use those leaves to your advantage. Same with lawn clippings, same thing. Mulching, I don't know what people think about leaving the grass on the yard. I guess there's an aesthetic there. Some people like their pool table level green grass, and you're gonna have a hard time convincing them otherwise. I don't fertilize my yard. I do use the leaves. I do use the mulching mower. It's just as green as theirs, maybe not as early in the year, but later on it is. It looks the same. And look at your landscaping too. I do encourage trees. Turf grass can be better than dirt, but it doesn't have the diversity that's going to at least help with anything wild or otherwise. So, maybe consider some alternatives. Maybe, dandelions just aren't that bad, but that's again an aesthetic that we fight frequently and try to overcome some of that.
Yeah, and that's such a tough thing. I mean, there's so many people I know, neighbors and things that, they work on getting rid of those dandelions, and we at Flow say, hey, those are first food for the bees and the butterflies, right. And they're native, and leave them. Leave the leaves in the fall. Don't cut down all your perennials, and because there's Yep. creatures hibernating in them over the winter, and that is just such a tough thing to convince people to change.
Very much so.
And I'll just give a couple more minutes for any more questions to come in. I had a question about adopting a storm drain. I think our science committee is working on that at Flow. What do you know what adopt a storm drain means and what we can be doing to help in that regard?
Well, it's kind of like, you see the adopt a roadside kind of thing going on around town, and certain communities will have that, they're taking care of picking up trash along a certain mile of roadway or something like that. It's very similar to that, looking at that storm system. I don't think, again, it's really recognizing what's in the storm drain, perhaps monitoring it, if it does need cleaning, being able to contact the municipal sources that can clean that out. I wouldn't suggest people cleaning them out themselves. Depending on the depth, they can be enormous and deep.
Yeah.
So,
but they can pull like the sticks away from the drain and anything that might clog, especially
trash
before big rain events.
Yep.
Yeah. We had a question.
And that's probably a good point, is really taking a look at those before rain events. Something that we do with construction inspection is kind of monitor the weather situation. And when we see a large rain event coming, we're contacting some of the construction sites and saying, you might want to take some of the protection off some of these inlets just so we don't cause any flooding, because safety is paramount. And a lot of these structures get plugged up for construction purposes, but when there's a storm event, it's time to open those up and keep it safe.
Yeah. Could you talk briefly about your Rain Garden Master Gardener program?
Yeah, I'm on the periphery of that. I know some of it. It's going on right now. We had actually really good response to it. In fact, I think we had to turn away folks because we had too many wanting to sign up for it. So it will continue. I know that much. It's intended to be like, the Master Gardener program is kind of directed at the gardening aspect of it. And the intent of this is to get people out there that understand rain gardens and their function and that stormwater component of it, and how to really make those successful. So that's really what that's about, and kind of developing those local champions that can look at these in a good technical way and keep them viable and active. More later, you can sign up on the next course, but keep an eye open, and we'll be making announcements, I'm sure, when the next course comes up.
Yeah, it seems like there is a lot of interest in people wanting to help with the rain gardens. I did a tabling event at the Grandview Hop a few weeks ago, and there were people coming up to Blue Columbus or Blueprint Columbus representatives nearby and asking them about how they could help. And the question came in: are any municipalities in the Olentangy watershed offering rain garden rebates?
Yes. I will say yes. If you have questions, call our office. Again, I don't run that program. I know of it.
You're talking about
we can certainly find out that information.
The backyard
conservation.
Conservation. If you go to the Franklin Soil and Water District website, which is on the screen there, in next to Dave's name, you can get information on that community backyard gardens conservation program. And I know in the past they had something for rain gardens and native plants.
Yep.
And composting. I participated in that. Yeah. So I've got a bin. I received a $50 rebate from your office for using for yard waste and some food waste and things like that to help my yard. So,
and we even have, at least for Turkey Run residents in Upper Arlington, we have a enhanced program for installation of stormwater BMPs on Turkey Run. But that's cost share with us and UA for Turkey Run residents.
That's great. That's great. Well, I think that's it for our questions, Dave. I want to very much thank you, Dave Reutter and Franklin Soil and Water Conservation District for the excellent program. I learned so much about, you know, the deep tunnel system and the different types of systems that you offer or that are out there. I didn't realize there were 3 different types. And just understanding the impact and the overlay between sanitary systems and stormwater systems and the risks there, particularly in older cities. So that was very, very helpful. For those of you attending, our next webinar with Flo is going to be Wednesday, November 16th at 6 o'clock. And our speaker will be Rebecca Rose, who works for the Ohio Wildlife Center. And she's going to be talking about shelter. It's a program called Give Me Shelter, and it's about what we can do to help native wildlife in the watershed in terms of providing them with shelter, things we can do to help them out, such as leaving the leaves, as we just talked about. So thank you again, Dave, and thank you to all for attending, and we appreciate all your time. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.